All right, in this video, we're going to finish up our graphing of cosine functions. So we have example 4, cosine x plus 2. So since we have an understood 1 in the front here, that means that the amplitude is equal to 1. There is an understood 1 between cosine and x, so that means that the period is the parent graph period, which is 2 pi. And then, of course, this positive 2, since there are no parentheses, it's just added on. That means that we are going to have a shift up of 2. So I am going to draw my y-axis, my x-axis, and then I am going to draw another solid line right up here. And again, the x-axis stays right where it is. It's just that the center of the graph is moving up too. So technically you don't need this line, it's just there to help guide your graph. And then of course our amplitude is 1. So that would be y equals 3. And this one is y equals 1. All right, so, and looking at this now, I'm going to mark my x-axis. Since the period is 2 pi, we divide that by 4, so each mark is worth half of a pi. And over here, I'll have the same thing. And I am going to make marks on my middle line that marks the middle of my graph as well that correspond so that I can make sure I cross that in the right spot. And there's no reflection here, so that means that my graph is going to look like this. Just like that. Awesome. All right, example 5. We have 2 cosines, so the amplitude is equal to 2. There's an understood 1 here between cosine and the parentheses, so that means the period is 2 pi, the same as the parent function for cosine. And then since all of this is in parentheses, that means that I have a right shift of pi over 2. So remember from our sine videos, when we have a phase shift or a horizontal shift, we're going to start with that. So the middle now, I'm going to call that right pi over 2. So since I'm moving pi over 2 to the right, that means in the positive direction. So I'm going to mark that as my middle and move to the right 1, 2, 3, 4. And to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so since the period is 2 pi, that means to the right, or sorry, that means because, I can speak. So to the right, I've got 2 pi, so all of this is 2 pi, so 2 pi split up into 4 equal pieces would be half of a pi, or pi over 2. So that means that here is going to be pi over 2. So when I add pi over 2 to this already existing pi over 2, I just get pi. And then when I add another half pi, I get 3 pi over 2, and then 2 pi, and then 5 pi over 2. And then to the left, I'm going to subtract pi over 2. So pi over 2 minus pi over 2 is 0. That's where my y-axis will go. And then I'm going to have negative pi over 2, negative pi, and negative 3 pi over 2. All right, so my amplitude is going to be 2. So I'm going to just make my dotted line here. Y equals 2. And down here as well, I almost wrote those values too big. Y equals negative 2. And then, of course, my graph is going to begin right up here at the top of pi over 2. So it is going to look just like that. And there's our 2 cycles. Do not forget to put your y-axis in at the 0. Awesome. All right, let's go to the last example here. So I've got a lot going on in this equation. So let's just read it from left to right. This -2 means that the graph will move down 2. And then the negative means that we will have a reflection. And then the 3 here means that the amplitude is equal to 3. And the 1/2, and we're in degrees here because of theta, so that means the period is going to be 360 divided by 1/2, which means 360 times 2, because it's 360 times the reciprocal, which is 720. All right, and then we're going to have in our parentheses here, we've got theta plus 180, so that means we are actually going left 180 degrees. All right, so this one is going to be a little bit tricky, but no worries. So the first thing we're going to start with is we're going to start with our labeling our x-axis. Since we do have a phase shift for this particular problem, that means that we are going to not put in our y-axis yet. So we are going to take care of this down 2 first. So going to draw a solid line, and remember that's going to be not the x-axis. The x-axis is already here. This is going to represent a guide for the center of my graph. So be careful with that. Okay, now from there, I am going to look at my amplitude dashed lines. So I'm going to need 1 up here. Okay, because it's 2, and then we add this 1 right here. So that's going to be at y equals 1. So see the distance here. Oh, I'm sorry, this should be -2 right here. Sorry, babies. So the distance between the 1 and the -2 is 3. And then, of course, we're going to do the same thing down here. Make sure these are pretty equally spaced so your graph won't look all wonky. And so that's going to be y equals -5. Excellent. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we are going to mark on our x-axis our center point where we're starting. And we're going to mark that on my center of my graph as well. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to look at the fact that I'm starting at left 180. So left 180 would imply -180 because it's to the left of 0. So I am going to put -180 right at that center mark there. So -180 is going to be right there. And then to the right of -180, I am going to write 4 marks, equally spaced, and on the left, I'll do the exact same thing. So I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now this one's going to be tricky, because the period here is 720 degrees. That means that one cycle on this side is going to be a total of 720, and I'm going to have another cycle on this side of the -180 for 720. So I need to divide 720 by 4. So when I divide that by 4, I get 180 degrees. So just look at this to the left here. 720 divided by 4 is going to give me 180 degrees. So that means each of these spaces here are going to represent 180 degrees. All right. So let me get rid of these extra marks. Oh, dang it. See, you can't take me anywhere. All right, let's give my line back here. All right, so each of these spaces is going to be 180. So if I have -180 degrees and I add 180 to it, I get 0. And then I'm going to add another 180, and then another 180, and then another 180. I'm just making sure I do my math right here. So that gives me 540. And then to the left of negative 180, I'm going to do the same thing, only subtract. So I've got 180 minus 180, so that is going to be negative 360. And then I'll have negative 540, and then negative 720, and negative 900. Okay, so those are my values, and I'm going to make marks on my center line for my graph as well, so I can draw this nice and beautifully. Okay, so we've taken care of our amplitude, our down to, our period. All that's left is to draw in our graph and then our y-axis. So the reflection, don't forget that. That means at negative 180, rather than starting at the top, I am going to be starting at the bottom. So it's going to start right here, and it's going to go through here. Oh, dang it. I hate it when it does that. Ugh. There we go. Not my best drawing job, but it's cool. There we go. Not horrible. And then, of course, my y-axis goes right there. Easy peasy lemon squeezy.